When I boarded my flight to Thailand, the only thing on my mind was a peaceful 2-week escape from my HOA's constant nitpicking. But somewhere between Bangkok street markets and midnight beaches, my world collapsed. My phone buzzed nonstop, neighbors, realtors, and even my bank. The HOA president, Karen Patterson, had listed my home for sale, and someone had already made an offer. By the time I rushed back across the world, the lock on my front door wasn't mine anymore. How far would someone go for power, and how do you fight an HOA that thinks it owns you? Drop your location and comment. Let's see how far this story reaches around the world. Before everything unraveled, my life in Silver Grove Estates felt almost picture-perfect. The kind of suburban calm that made you forget the world outside even existed. Every morning, sunlight spilled across identical, manicured lawns and pastel-painted homes lined in precise symmetry. The HOA called it community harmony. I called it quiet control. I'd moved there 3 years earlier, a 32-year-old freelance architect with a love for modern minimalism and enough savings to buy my first real home. It wasn't grand, but it was mine. I spent weekends redesigning the backyard, planting bamboo, and adding a koi pond that reflected the sky. My neighbors would wave, smile, and whisper about how different my style was from the rest. I didn't mind. I liked being the quiet one. Then there was Karen Patterson, HOA president, self-proclaimed guardian of the neighborhood's standards. She was the type who treated every flower bed and mailbox like a personal mission from heaven. Her clipboard was practically an accessory, and her power came from 3 things: fear, gossip, and the HOA bylaws she could quote better than scripture. At first, our interactions were harmless. She'd stop by to remind me that my modern fence didn't quite match the aesthetic, or she'd leave notes about non-approved landscape, modifications, small things, annoying but manageable. Still, I noticed something subtle each month. Her tone shifted. The polite smile disappeared, replaced by condescension wrapped in neighborly concern. She didn't like people who didn't play by her rules. And apparently, I was one of them. Despite the tension, I kept my distance. Work was steady, life was peaceful, and the upcoming trip to Thailand felt like a reward after years of grinding deadlines. 2 weeks of beaches, street food, and digital silence. Exactly what I needed. But the week before I left, Karen showed up at my door with a thin smile and a thicker stack of HOA notices. Something about unapproved structures and pending compliance fines. I brushed it off, promising to handle it after vacation. What I didn't know was that Karen had already decided how to handle it herself. The morning I left for Thailand, everything felt perfectly normal. The air was warm, the neighborhood quiet, and my luggage packed with everything I'd need for a 2-week break from the grind and from Karen. I locked up, set my security system, and told my next-door neighbor, Mrs. Franklin, to keep an eye on the mail. It felt good walking away from Silver Grove Estates, even if only temporarily. The first few days abroad were bliss. I was halfway across the world, free from HOA letters and friendly reminders. For the first time in months, I didn't feel watched. But peace doesn't last long when someone like Karen Patterson lives across the street. It started small, a single email from the HOA marked urgent. I ignored it. Vacation meant no stress, no drama. But by the 3rd day, there were 5 new messages, each more aggressive than the last. Failure to comply, violation, pending, immediate, board action required. I rolled my eyes, assuming it was another complaint about the bamboo or the pond. Then came the message that made my stomach twist. Notice of property reclamation. At first, I thought it was spam. It mentioned an upcoming board decision regarding my property's non-compliance with Section 4B of the Architectural Covenant. It even referenced potential property recovery measures. I laughed it off, thinking it was just Karen flexing her authority in her usual way. But the tone was colder than usual, clinical, like something legal. Still, I brushed it aside. I wasn't about to let Karen ruin my trip. I spent my days exploring floating markets and Buddhist temples, watching the sun dip behind ocean waves, completely unaware that my life back home was being quietly dismantled. By the time I hit the 1-week mark, the messages stopped. I figured Karen had moved on to her next target. But silence can be more dangerous than noise. Then came the call. It was Mrs. Franklin, my elderly neighbor, whispering frantically through the receiver. "They've got realtors outside your house," she said. "And an A for sale sign, dear. Right on your lawn." Karen was here with 2 men in suits. She said the property was being repossessed due to HOA violations. They had paperwork. Real paperwork. I saw them change the lockbox on your door. I nearly dropped the phone. My chest tightened as confusion and disbelief tangled in my head. I tried calling Karen. No answer. Tried the HOA office, voicemail. Tried my bank. They confirmed a pending property transfer under my address. That's when panic turned into something colder, terror. Cut my trip short that night, booking the next flight back. 23 sleepless hours later, I was standing in front of my own home. Except it didn't feel like mine anymore. The lawn was spotless, suspiciously spotless, as if someone had staged it. My garden had been trimmed into perfect uniform lines. The koi pond drained. The bamboo is gone. And right in the center of the yard stood a gleaming "for sale, pending offer" sign. And there she was, Karen Patterson, clipboard in hand, dressed like she'd just come from a board meeting. Her eyes widened for a moment when she saw me step out of the taxi, but her smirk returned just as quickly. She said almost sweetly, "Oh, you're back early. There seems to be a misunderstanding about your property's status." Misunderstanding. That word echoed in my head as I realized the nightmare wasn't an exaggeration. It was real. Karen had gone too far. She claimed the HOA had foreclosed on my home due to cumulative unpaid fines and structural violations, but I'd never missed a payment, never received a final notice, and never even been warned of foreclosure proceedings. She spoke with the confidence of someone who thought she was untouchable. When I demanded proof, she handed me a printed packet of documents stamped with HOA, letterhead, and what looked like a legal authorization, complete with my forged signature. My name, my address, my fake consent to sell, every paper dripping with fraud. I called the police. They arrived, took statements, but claimed it was a civil matter between the homeowner and the HOA. Karen smiled through the entire exchange, tending to be helpful. Over the next few days, things only got worse. Realtors kept showing up for viewings, saying they'd been told the property was vacant. My utilities were switched to inactive status. Even my mail was being redirected. It was as if I'd been erased from my own life. The worst part? The community didn't rally behind me. Most neighbors avoided eye contact, too scared to cross the HOA board. A few whispered sympathy when Karen wasn't looking, but no one dared to speak up publicly. Karen had ruled Silver Grove with fear for years, and this was her ultimate display of power. But fear works both ways. When cornered, people either crumble or fight back. I started documenting everything, every email, every fake signature, every HOA notice, and every voicemail. I filed official complaints with the county property office and contacted a lawyer specializing in HOA abuse cases. The deeper we dug, the uglier it got. Karen hadn't just fabricated my fines, she'd rerouted them into an administrative escrow she controlled. She'd been siphoning HOA funds for years, masking the theft behind phony penalties and fake maintenance fees. My case was just the one that exposed it all. When I showed my attorney the sale, listing and forged documents, he froze. "This isn't just fraud," he said. "It's criminal. We turned everything over to the police and county fraud division. And for the first time, the law listened. Investigators opened a full inquiry into Silver Grove HOA and its president." Karen's confident smile started to fade when officers began asking questions. Still, she wasn't done. Even as the investigation unfolded, Karen doubled down, sending cease and desist letters, claiming I was the one committing fraud, accusing me of harassment, and even trying to file a restraining order. It was chaos, sleepless nights, endless paperwork, and a tug of war between sanity and exhaustion. But underneath the fear, something inside me hardened. Karen thought she could take everything, my home, my peace, my dignity. What she didn't expect was that I'd fight her not as a victim, but as an architect of her downfall, and that moment, when she realized the walls were closing in on her, was the beginning of her own collapse. The investigation hit its boiling point faster than anyone expected. Within weeks, county auditors uncovered years of tampered records, falsified transactions, and missing HOA funds, all tied back to Karen Patterson. What began as a simple property dispute had escalated into a full-blown criminal case, shaking the foundation of Silver Grove Estates. But before the arrest, there was one final confrontation, the homeowners' emergency meeting. Karen had called it herself, desperate to control the narrative. Every resident was required to attend, and the community center filled with folding chairs, hushed whispers, and a thick, suffocating sense of tension. I sat quietly in the back, watching as she stood at the podium in her crimson blazer, voice trembling yet trying to exude confidence. "It has come to my attention," she began, "that certain individuals have spread dangerous lies about the HOA's financial practices." She scanned the crowd and fixed her gaze on me. "These baseless accusations have caused unnecessary panic and division." For a tense moment, people nodded, unsure, uneasy. Karen had ruled this neighborhood for years with a mix of charm, intimidation, and fear. Then my lawyer entered, flanked by 2 county investigators in plain clothes. The room's energy shifted instantly, the weight of accountability hanging heavy. Karen froze mid-sentence as one of the investigators handed her a thick evidence folder, pages of bank statements, false signatures, and property documents bearing her forged authorizations. The silence was so sharp, it could have cut through glass. My lawyer's voice broke it calmly, measured but unrelenting. "Mrs. Patterson, these documents show you illegally transferred ownership of a private property, forged financial authorization forms, and embezzled HOA funds totaling nearly $240,000. Karen's face turned pale. "That's ridiculous," she snapped, her voice cracking. "He's lying. He's trying to destroy this community." But the investigators didn't flinch. "We've confirmed it with county records. Mrs. Patterson, you're under investigation for real estate fraud, forgery, and embezzlement." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Neighbors who had once feared her stared in disbelief, whispering and clutching their phones to record. Karen stumbled backward, clutching the podium, muttering excuses that no one believed anymore. The mask of power she had worn for years was cracking. When the officers stepped forward and placed her in handcuffs, the room fell completely silent, not out of shock but relief. For years, the community had lived under her watchful eye, terrified of the next letter, the next fine, and the next petty rule. Now, for the first time, they saw her powerless. As she was led out, she turned toward me, her expression shifting from outrage to something almost pleading. "You did this," she whispered. I met her gaze, calm but firm. "No, Karen, you did this to yourself." Outside, the flashing red and blue lights reflected across manicured lawns. Neighbors watched in awe, some smiling nervously, others sighing in relief. The oppressive weight that had hung over Silver Grove for years finally began to lift. In the days following Karen Patterson's arrest, Silver Grove Estates didn't just feel quieter, it felt alive again. The endless HOA emails stopped. The constant inspections, warnings, and watchful stares vanished. For the first time in years, people opened their blinds, children played freely on the sidewalks, and neighbors smiled at one another without fear. Karen's downfall became the story of the neighborhood. The local paper ran the headline, "The HOA president who tried to sell a home." That wasn't hers. Online forums buzzed. Social media shared every detail. She had become a cautionary tale, the very face of suburban corruption, hiding behind pristine lawns and the illusion of community standards. For me, the aftermath was personal. My house had been tampered with, staged, and stripped of the life I built. The koi pond had been drained, the bamboo ripped out, and furniture rearranged for showings that should never have happened. Each scar, each alteration, told a story of violation, but I didn't let it stay that way. I rebuilt. I redesigned my backyard from scratch, restoring the koi pond, replanting bamboo, and adding a small bench under a maple tree. Each detail was a declaration. My space, my rules, my peace restored, Silver Grove slowly healed too. The new HOA board refunded bogus fines, rewrote the bylaws, and hosted the first community barbecue in over a decade. People who had once whispered in fear now spoke openly, laughing on the same lawns that had symbolized control. Mrs. Franklin, my courageous neighbor, became a quiet hero, reminding everyone of the power of standing up when it matters most. Sometimes I think back to that night in Thailand, under neon lights, blissfully unaware that my home was being sold. It's strange how peace and chaos can exist side by side, how one single moment can change everything. Peace isn't the absence of conflict. It's the courage to confront it and reclaim what's yours. No HOA, no rulebook, and no title give anyone the right to own your life. A community isn't about control, it's about trust, and when trust is rebuilt, when fear is replaced with fairness, even Silver Grove Estates can finally live up to its name. She tried to sell my house, but in the end, it was her illusion of power that got sold out. And the price she paid? Everything.